The following podcast deals with the controversial subject of marine mammals in captivity. In the 35-plus years that have passed since Marineland's closure, there's been a huge sea change in public opinion about this topic, and rightfully so. Throughout the course of this podcast, I hope to deal with these issues with honesty and sensitivity, while also acknowledging the tremendous awe, joy, and respect these animals have inspired in millions. And now, on with the show. On the 12th and final episode of LA's Own Marineland, we're going to take a look at the park's legacy and ponder what could have been if things turned out differently. We'll also follow up on the lives of the animals that were transferred to other parks after Marineland's closure. Finally, we'll get the last word on Marineland from those who knew it best and loved it most, Marinelanders themselves. So make your way over to Shamu Stadium, take a nice jaunt through the skywalks, and say hi to Corky. But before you sit down for the show, there's one warning. If you're seated in the first 10 rows, you will get wet. You may get soaked.
Seven-tenths of our world is covered with water. In Los Angeles, there's a place that overlooks this vast frontier. A place of wilderness. A place of drama. Hold your breath. It's Marineland. Plummet into global oceans teeming with life. Go eye to glowing eye with predators of the deep. Venture into a realm as intriguing as outer space. All a touch closer at LA's Own Marineland.
On September 26, 1988, Orky the killer whale, one of Marineland's most beloved animals, passed away at SeaWorld in San Diego. The cruel irony was that the animal that was so coveted by SeaWorld that it led to Marineland's closure only lasted 20 months at the park. Even though Orky didn't spend that long at SeaWorld, he made an important contribution to its breeding program. On September 23, 1988, 3 days before his death from chronic wasting, Can-Do 5, a female at the park, gave birth to a female calf sired by Orky, appropriately named Orchid. Orchid is currently 33 years old and the oldest captive-born orca. She clearly got Orky's intelligence because she's known by trainers at the park as the, quote, rocket scientist for her ability to learn new behaviors. 2 months after Orky's death, another calf he sired, Kayla, was born to Kanow, who had been transferred to SeaWorld in San Antonio. Kayla would go on to have Orky's only grandchild, Halen, who was born in 2005 and sadly passed away 3 years later. Kayla died in 2019 at SeaWorld Orlando at the age of 30. 11 months after the birth of Orchid, one of the most tragic events in the history of marine parks happened at SeaWorld San Diego, involving Can-Do and Corky. Midway through a 25-minute-long 4 p.m. show at Shamu Stadium, Corky was performing before thousands in the main show pool when out of nowhere, Can-Do swam out of the back holding pool and rammed into her full speed with her mouth opened, then careened into a wall. According to the LA Times, after the attack, the pair circled each other in the tank for another 2 minutes until the confrontation ended. After calm was restored, the horrified crowd saw blood trickling out of Can-Do's blowhole. Can-Do and her offspring, Orchid, were ushered into the back pool while the crowd was told to leave the stadium. Disturbing video taken from the crowd shows Can-Do with blood shooting out of her blowhole 6-7 feet into the air and splashing onto the walls of the tank. The trainer stood by, unable to do anything to help Can-Do's condition. Her impact with the wall led to a fractured upper jaw, causing fatal hemorrhaging of major arteries in her nasal passages. After 45 minutes of struggling, Can-Do sank to the bottom of the tank and died. Orchid circled her mother's lifeless body until the baby was handed off to her new caretaker, Corky. Dr. James F. McBain said that Can-Do engaged in, quote, a normal socially induced act of aggression to assert her dominance over Corky, a behavior known as raking. Some say that Can-Do's act of aggression came from jealousy over Corky being too close to her young child. The dramatic events that happened at Shamu Stadium on August 21, 1989 led to the tragic death of Can-Do. However, it also began a second life for Corky, who, after struggling through several unsuccessful pregnancies, was now a surrogate mother to her mate Orky's daughter. A week later, Anheuser-Busch agreed to pay $1.1 billion for 4 SeaWorld parks and 2 additional theme parks from Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch. Less than 3 years after HBJ closed Marineland, it was now out of the theme park business. 2 weeks after the ownership change, William Yovanovitch, HBJ's chief executive, announced he would step down from the company, but continue as the chairman of the company's board and executive committee. Ed Capel, Marineland's group sales manager from 1979 to 87.
And ultimately, life does come full circle. And so Yovanovitch, the guy with Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch that was responsible for how this all played out, he was forced out of HBJ and his name was taken off the company.
Wow. Because of the Marineland fiasco or other?
I think probably because of the kind of person he was, ultimately. I think, the way he handled Marineland, I think, is the way he did business.
Yeah. 80s corporate raider type,
Yeah, just not a nice person.
If you may indulge me for a moment, as your humble narrator and the writer-producer of this podcast, I'd like to break the fourth wall and interject myself into the story for our final episode. In 1994, when I was a junior in high school, I launched Operation Orky with 3 of my friends in high school, Shannon, Lee, and Jason. Our goal? To break into Marineland. What do you remember about Operation Orky, Shannon Shidaki?
I think it was one of those points where this looks like this is going to be an excellent adventure. Like anything that a teenager, especially a teenage male, does, it has to be funny.
Right.
Yeah, it has to seem sophomorically funny, and it was. Especially when you showed me the map of Marineland. I was like, oh, this is more interesting than just your normal B&E. That's short for breaking and entering. That's the lingo of Generation X.
I think I sold it to you guys as like a Scooby-Doo kind of thing. And for me, it was more of like an obsessive thing. But we did have 3 guys from the North High School drama club. Me, you, our buddy Jason Buckles, who was a fellow actor at North High School in Torrance. And then we brought along our buddy Lee Telez. I think we did one run as a test run and then a second run, which was the actual B&E break-in.
Yeah.
We parked there's like an auxiliary parking spot, probably not for Marineland, almost like an overlooking place, like a makeout point on Palos Verdes Drive, I guess PV Drive South. And we parked there, and then we walked all the way down past the front where they had what would be where you'd pay for parking, where there was like a security gate, and then the security sign said, "Sorry, we're closed." And then I remember...
we had to do a couple of things. We had to do we were what they call in the biz scoping the joint. We weren't just a bunch of ne'er-do-wells.
No. And then we walked down a long kind of road, and then we got into the Marineland parking lot. And in the parking lot at that time was kind of overgrown, I remember, but they still had all the signs up where it was like, you parked in lobster, you parked in, a different name of fish or whatever, where, like at Disneyland, like you parked in Thumper, they had that stuff still up. And I remember it was a night where it was really dark, and the only thing we had on us was like the moonlight. But it was like a full moon. It was like a really bright moon.
And, we're by the beach. There wasn't very many clouds that night. You could smell the salt in the air. But it was definitely a dark but moonlit night.
And then we got to the gate that was around it. And it was a blue painted gate, kind of chip paint. And it was about, I would say, 7 feet high. And it was like vertical, like lines on the gate. So you had to kind of monkey up it versus like feet up it.
Yeah. It wasn't a chain link fence. It was a entrance gate to keep non-ticketed people outside where they belong.
On the outside, those who couldn't afford the $4 to get in.
Yeah. We can't have that kind of riffraff inside Marineland.
So we all hopped the fence, and I think we all did a good job. We all hopped over the fence, found ourselves on the other way, and then immediately we were right at the Sky Tower, which there was a whole bunch of kind of like overgrown flora and fauna, but the Sky Tower was there, and you could look up and see the thing 300 feet in the sky, and they had the seating area, the actual part that went up and down was way up at kind of the top of the spire, and there was a ramp you could run up to go up to it. We didn't go up that, I don't think, but
no.
There was a bunch of flagpoles that had no flags on it around there, and that was like truly haunting.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, we're already in sort of a legally dangerous scenario. We're all underage, and we certainly did not tell our parents where we were going to be.
No.
So here we are. It's a precarious scenario. You know, having the Sky Tower perched where it was, it made it so that, you know, ne'er-do-wells couldn't get in. Homeless people, vagabonds, if you will, couldn't get in there. But if the brakes go,
all the way down, right? But it would spin all the way down slowly, you know. Then eventually, I think we split up into twos, and I think I went with Jason and you went with Lee, and we kind of broke right, you broke left. So I went towards what would be where the Orca tank was, and then eventually Baja Reef, and then I think you guys met us around over there, and Baja Reef was there, and it was, you could still see all of the kind of the coral, the fake coral that was in there. The whole setup was there. The whole building was there, but it was just like the glass. You had like viewing glass that people could see into, and that was cracked, and there was some graffiti there, and it looked like if you were to try to bring it back to life, because there was some talk about doing that when they were going to build the hotel there, that it seemed like it was pretty much impossible. But it was totally Scooby-Doo ghost town and totally creepy.
And so when we split up, we kind of wanted to take in as much of the park as we could as a group without staying out too late. So we kind of gave each other assignments. I can't at this point divulge what those assignments were because they're top secret and I don't remember. So Lee and I we ended up going to the sort of cliff edge and finding a path that went around the side and down the cliff. I don't think that would have been accessible in the heyday of Marineland. But so we went down that side of the cliff, and after a while, the cliff kind of started to crumble beneath our feet. So we kind of spooked and came back.
And probably over to Baja Reef where Jason and I were. And then I think it was at that point, I believe we were all together. Now, at this point, it's very dark out. We're very afraid of security or cops or whatever. Like, we're good kids. You know, we fear getting into trouble. You know, we weren't these, like, renegade F-it kind of kids. We were like, we just got back from drama practice, okay? And there's a parking lot right behind where Baja Reef is, and there's a kind of an ad hoc warehouse, and one that I think was put up in maybe 1981-ish or whatever in that parking lot. It was a big white warehouse, and as we got close to over there, I think we went to go investigate that, and then I remember a massive light went off, like a huge motion sensor light, and then we were scared like nothing.
Yeah, we booked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bravery, duty, everything flew out the window, and we just turned tail for sure.
And so I remember we ran through that and went back to the gate. It was kind of like almost we met up at like the Sky Tower and went to get over the fence. And I recall I got over, Jason got over, you got over, and then our buddy Lee, who was like a big dude, he was like, he's a 6'3" guy. he couldn't quite make it over. So Channon, we had no idea.
Yeah,
do we leave this guy behind?
Is he a casualty on Operation Corky?
He never said, just leave me. Just leave me.
Yeah. We didn't know if we were going to have to fold up an orca flag and deliver it to his mom.
You ever been in one of those situations in life where we're like, well, this is just effed? You're like, I don't know how this is going to work. The thing was, you were very into lifting weights at that time.
For somebody of my stature, one wouldn't think that I could boost a 6'3" fellow out of the POW camp into freedom. But I decided to go back into dangerous territory. And I gave him a boost. The old, interlinking fingers and stepping into my hands boost to get him over. I'm proud to report that we all survived Operation Corky. But, we were just a couple of dumb kids that printed a map and went on a treasure hunt.
On Wednesday, March 8, 1995, real estate investor Jim York purchased the 102-acre Marineland property at an auction after its former owner, James G. Monahan, declared bankruptcy. Monahan owned the property for 8 years with nothing to show but a ghost town. York, who lives in nearby Rolling Hills Estates, planned to build a 450-room hotel and oceanfront golf course on the property. On Monday, June 6, 1995, the 244-foot-tall Sky Tower that proudly stood near the entrance of Marineland and gave hundreds of thousands of people awe-inspiring views of the ocean was slowly dismantled. The lights of the tower went out in 1991, and aviators were told to steer clear of the tower to avoid hitting it. Carolyn Patru, the planning administrator for the city of Rancho Palos Verdes, was surprised by the lack of community concern about the tower's demise. "I thought we would be getting calls and calls," she said. But we haven't. 8.5 years after its closure, what was left of Marineland was nothing more than a public nuisance. The remains of the Sky Tower were sold for scrap metal. One of the greatest Marineland reunions happened when Tracy Belting, who worked in Marineland's animal care department, was reunited with 2 of the park's dolphins years after its closure.
The dolphins were, of course, the big attraction for me. I know everybody's into the orcas, but the dolphins are really what caught my heart. And the 2 premier show animals from the late 60s on were the 2 male dolphins named Flipper and Simo. Okay. They were like the stars of the show, Flipper and Simo. And, of course, I never got to be a trainer at Marineland. By the time it closed in 1987, that was it. All the animals got distributed amongst the SeaWorld parks, and we all got on with our lives and got jobs. And I ended up getting a job at the Minnesota Zoo that had bottlenose dolphins. Oh. And we had females, and they were looking to get some male dolphins for a breeding group. And SeaWorld had these quote-unquote 2 surplus animals. They were in San Antonio, Texas at the time, and the keeper that brought them to Minnesota Zoo said, well, these 2 they're proven breeders, but they've never been trained and they don't know anything, but here's your dolphins. And it worked well. The Minnesota Zoo went on to have several babies born there, but it turns out that it was Flipper and Simo. Oh. And I found out when I was looking through some old records, there was a very faded mimeograph of the old Marineland logo. And I was like, are you kidding? Flipper and Simo. So I called up all the old trainers, and I'm like, what are the cues to the behaviors? What did they know how to do? And oh, man, it was like watching 2 grandparents come out of retirement. They remembered every behavior they'd ever learned in the shows. And all the behaviors came back, and the head of Minnesota Zoo thought we were great trainers or something, thinking we trained all these behaviors. In fact, we were just resurrecting all of the behaviors that the animals had learned how to do when they lived at Marineland. So I finally did get to work with the dolphins at Marineland. It just happened to be at the Minnesota Zoo. and I can't make that up.
Wow, that is incredible. So, and how much time had passed between Marineland and going to what was it, the Minnesota Zoo?
Yeah, the Minnesota Zoo. I think it had been 4 years since Marineland had closed. Yeah, when we got them.
That's crazy that they didn't even know that these were two of the most...
Well, the person that shipped them up didn't know. I'm sure somebody must have known at some point back when, but all those animals just got distributed, and, it's kind of like the telephone game. The behavioral history didn't go with the animals. They didn't know. And they were old by then, dolphins living into their 30s is a really old dolphin, and that's how old these animals were. But little did they know, Simo went on to be 54 years old.
Wow.
He was one of the longest living male dolphins ever.
After being transferred from the Minnesota Zoo in 2012 to Marine World in Vallejo, California, later renamed Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, Simo passed away in May 2018 at the age of 54. He was the oldest dolphin living under human care. Simo was a ruggedly handsome, large, and imposing male who was also infinitely joyful and playful, said Animal Care Director Diane Cameron. We feel so fortunate to have been part of his life. On Thursday, June 9, 2016, Bubbles the pilot whale died at the Dolphin Stadium in SeaWorld in San Diego. It's believed that she was caught off the coast of California in 1966 and died 50 years later. At the time, Bubbles was the oldest pilot whale in captivity and was performing right up to the day she died in the Dolphin Day show. SeaWorld estimates that she had performed for over 100 million people in her lifetime. Bubbles' death briefly put Marineland back into the public's consciousness and brought attention to an important part of the park's legacy that was rotting away in a city yard in Rancho Palos Verdes. In 1988, the 28-foot-high fiberglass Bubbles statue that sat atop the sign at the Marineland entrance was stored in a city yard in Rancho Palos Verdes with only a tarp to protect it. There, this iconic symbol of Marineland has sat for decades. Recently, it's been visible to the general public from the Rancho Caninos dog park near the city yard. City administrators have signaled support to put the statue back on display at the Point Vicente Interpretive Center across the cliffs from its former home, but efforts have stalled due to budget considerations. John Sampson has started a GoFundMe page to repair the statue and reinstall it, but he believes that work needs to happen soon. I don't think in another year or so it would be in any condition, even to save, Sansom told the Daily Breeze. It's going to need considerable restoration and repair. Rancho Palos Verdes Mayor Eric Alegria.
Perfect spot because it is overlook for the Pacific Ocean, and a lot of whale watching is done there. It's a rich part of our history, an iconic part of our history, and that we're going to be able to bring back and celebrate.
You can donate to the campaign to bring Bubbles back at GoFundMe.com under Preserve Bubbles the Whale. One of Marineland's most important lasting legacies is the Marine Mammal Care Center. After Marineland was closed, a group of SeaWorld employees volunteered to keep the facility running temporarily as community leaders decided what to do next. Harcourt Brace Yovanovich told the city of RPV that it would donate $250,000 to build a new facility, but that offer was turned down. Eventually, as a condition for closing the park, HBJ was ordered to establish a $3 million fund to build a new Marine Mammal Care Center. After a temporary center was built on Dockweiler Beach near LAX, the Los Angeles Unified School District donated some land in San Pedro near the Port of LA to permanently house a new Marine Mammal Care Center, which was built using $1.5 million of HBJ's funds. Today, the Marine Mammal Care Center operates as a nonprofit hospital for stranded marine animals for 70 miles of coastline, from Malibu to Seal Beach. As the only year-round marine animal hospital in Los Angeles County, the Marine Mammal Care Center is one of the busiest in the country, admitting on average over 350 patients a year. You can visit the Care Center to see their wonderful work and meet their amazing animals on Saturdays and Sundays. If you poke around the gift shop, you just may find an old Marineland poster with a beautiful shot of Orky. Of course, feel free to donate at its website, marinemammalcare.org. "35 years after Marineland closed, it's believed that just about all of its animals have passed away. The only ones that I've heard that are still alive are a few flamingos at SeaWorld and of course, Corky the killer whale. At 57 years old, Corky is still a major part of the killer whale presentations at SeaWorld. I did a little snooping around and spoke with some trainers, and I won't name names, but they gave me a pretty detailed account of Corky's current health. The good news is that she's still doing well, although her eyesight isn't what it used to be and she has some difficulty hearing. To learn more about Corky's condition, I checked in with Nicole Schreiber, a marine biology student focusing on killer whale research and education, who primarily works with orca populations in Alaska. She has close ties with the trainers at SeaWorld in San Diego.
Yeah, so she's 57 this year, and she's doing really well as far as I know. I'm not privy to all the vet information, but from what I see, she has all her energy, she eats well, and she's the highest flying senior citizen I know, I'll tell you that. She has no shortage of energy. She is always enthusiastic and ready to go. So, despite being an old lady, she looks really, really good for her age. And knock on wood, she's doing really well. Corky performs just as much as the rest of the whales, and her age does not slow her down. Like I said, highest flying grandma around. She performs with a lot of enthusiasm. She seems to really enjoy it. It's an enriching part of her day, as with the other whales. And when sometimes the whales aren't in the actual orca encounter show that day, but they will be in the Dine with Orcas presentation, and of course during other training sessions throughout the day that maybe the public doesn't see, just to keep up their exercise and make sure they're using their brains. And she seems to just be completely into that. Her age is not really a factor.
Nicole says that Corky has a close relationship with a 9-year-old male named Makani.
Yeah, so a little bit of background as to how I got to know the San Diego pod and the trainers. I was born and raised in San Diego. I've been coming to the park since I was 2 years old. Didn't start really getting into killer whales until a bit later. But my opinions on captivity and captivity of orcas in general has definitely changed. I work with wild killer whales now. That's my goal. But one thing that's never changed is how much I appreciate those trainers and think that they really are the most incredible people. Whatever feelings I have about the park, the industry as a whole, one thing that is very clear to me is that those trainers give those whales the absolute best quality of life they possibly can with what they are given. And just seeing them every day back there, constantly thinking of how can we make this more enriching? What can we do? How can I interact with this whale in a different way, give them something new, and just playing with them, seeing how the whales respond, the relationships they build. It really, really is a truly special relationship. And without those trainers, the whales would definitely have a subpar quality of life. And these incredible humans, I can't say it enough, they dedicate absolutely everything to these animals. So despite what I think about captivity and whether it's a suitable environment for the animals or not, just know that those trainers are there to give them the absolute best quality of life physically possible. Whenever they talk about Corky, they just talk about how wonderful she is, how kind she is, what a fun old grandma. She's just fun to interact with. She's fun to work with. She's generally the first whale that people start to work with because she's just so gentle and understanding. She's a big animal. She has every chance to be aggressive, but she's just not. And it seems like that's what everyone just really appreciates about her most, is just what an incredibly kind animal she is and the relationships that you can build with her. That, her life definitely hasn't been an easy one, but I'm happy to say that she has definitely found stability at SeaWorld San Diego, and she really does seem to be doing the best that she can be doing. And I'm confident that she has the best quality of care she can. And I think she's finding her life, as, it's hard to anthropomorphize, but you can say that she's enjoying life from what I've seen of her behavior.
For the people who are listening to the podcast that suddenly kind of get turned on to the idea of going down to see Corky at SeaWorld, I know she's often in back observation tank. How would someone pick Corky out of the lineup of the, 8 other whales that they have there?
Yeah, so when you're first learning to identify whales, typically you're going to look at their dorsal fins and their eye patches. In the wild, we use dorsal fins primarily because that's the first thing that comes out of the water, and that's the first thing that goes below the water. Corky has a really, really tall, straight dorsal fin for a female, Typically, female killer whales have shorter, more curved dorsal fins. And she does have a teeny bit of a curve on the top, but it's much taller than you would typically expect for female killer whales. So tall, straight fin. She also has a tiny nick near the base of her fin. And we use nicks and scratches on dorsal fins to help identify the whales. They're kind of like fingerprints and tattoos. And you can also look in the wild for scarring on especially their saddle patch. That's the gray area just behind the dorsal fin. But in captivity, we can see the entire whale. So we also like to use the white markings because each of those are as unique as a human fingerprint. Corky has near her mouth, that's colloquially known as a mouth chip or subocular notch, if you want to be fancy. It's kind of triangular shaped. And her eye patches have a dip in them. One of them has kind of a little big, kind of hard to describe without looking at a picture. But she's got an indentation in the front of her eye patch, kind of like typical killer whale. She also, her chin is a little bit pointy. She's, northern resident. She really looks like a northern resident. But yeah, if you just look up pictures of Corky, you should get an idea really quickly. Just look for that tall, straight dorsal fin, and that's probably her.
You may have noticed this show has no advertising. Well, kind of like PBS, we're relying on our listeners to support our efforts to preserve Marineland's history through this podcast, which has taken countless hours to produce. There are two ways you can help. First, you can make a donation to the show through PayPal by clicking on the donate button on our website at marinelandpodcast.com. That's marinelandpodcast.com. Or you can take a deeper dive into Marineland's history by becoming a Patreon subscriber. At patreon.com/marinelandpodcast, you can listen to full interviews with 19 people closest to the park. You'll also get the Patreon exclusive episode, Making Marineland, where I share the backstory of how this podcast came to be. It's all just $5.99 a month. Get started at patreon.com/marinelandpodcast. Thanks for your support. Now back to the show. In June 2009, 22 and a half years after Marineland was closed, Jim York's resort, Terranea, finally opened on the former Marineland property. It's a nearly $500 million, 582-room, full-service hotel with a 9-hole golf course, 135,000 square feet of conference space, and facilities adequate to hold 5 weddings simultaneously. A room will set you back upwards of $450 a night, but if you want to enjoy incredible views and roam around the property where Marineland once stood, you can pop over and enjoy a drink and a bowl of clam chowder at Nelson's Restaurant on the cliffs. What's nice is that the people at Terranea have embraced the property's past, and there's a conference room known as the Marineland Room. There have been 2 Marineland reunions on the property that have been fully supported by Terranea and its staff. Fred Schaefer, Marineland warehouse manager from 1976 to 87.
But you can walk your dog down there. You can go in there and you can get a glass of wine and sit out on the cliffs and get a glass of wine, and it's $15. So what? You can have a great time and enjoy the sunset. The stuff that we used to do, and that's what's so cool about Terranea, is they are really into the community up there. They're really into the history of Marineland. You should go there and walk around the park, walk around the hotel sometime.
Yeah.
Those posters I made for the reunion in 2012.
Yeah.
They put them. I gave them the artwork, and they put them on acrylic or canvas. And now, if you walk in on the restaurants on the side where their big pool is, they're hanging on there. All 12 of my posters, and it says, Marineland was here. But they have them all there, and they're on display in their hallway. They have the Marineland ballroom. I mean, they're keeping the heritage and the feel of the park and the family, which is totally cool. They've been very supportive with everything we've done with our reunions, and they've always helped us out. So I really, love the fact that they're doing that. They're not just some corporate chain coming in and doing whatever they want to do and screw everybody else. This is our property now. They're trying to keep the feel of the property. A lot of the big trees that they had at Marineland, the big coral trees, they would take those trees and they put them all in pots and they moved them while they built the park at the resort. And then they took them and they placed a lot of the Marineland trees around in the resort.
Oh.
So rather than destroying the trees and planting their own. No, they took all Marineland's trees and they created them all. And they put them off on the side where they did all the construction. And then they'll go and they place them around on their property to repurpose them. Nelson's was the little restaurant right on the cliffs where they have a fire pit and stuff. That was the only building at Terranea that still has the same footprint as Marineland. That was one of the lower plaza restaurants at the time at Marineland.
Oh, really? So that actual, the bones of that was a Marineland restaurant?
Yeah, the footprint of that restaurant was part of it, maybe even part of a wall, because they did a renovation. That's what allowed the renovation of the place rather than a brand new thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When you refurbish a house, renovate a house, just keep one panel, one wall. Well, keeping that Nelson's footprint there was what allowed them to do a lot of stuff they did at Terranea.
As we near the end of this podcast, it's hard not to ponder what might have happened if things had gone another way. During my research for this project, I learned there was a group of Marineland officials who had a plan to take over the park before it was sold to HBJ. The ultimate goal was to put the park's animals first. Linda Malik, Marineland's marketing director from 1979 to 87.
Yeah, that was something, with John Corcoran at the helm. John was just a great guy, a great boss, great general manager, just a really wonderful man. With John and all of the 6 of us directors, we spoke a lot about doing this, and we put financials together, and we actually went out and talked to a couple of financial, at the time, there wasn't the VCs that would do something like this. So you had to go to literally to the bank and talk to the bankers. And we had a good financial story towards the end of Marineland. We went and put together some pro formas and looked at what we could do to change things around in the park. I mean, we knew at the time, frankly, that the animals were too big for the tanks, that we were going to have to do something else. So we talked about doing a whole new, more like an outdoor aquarium, like a sort of a really boutique facility, maybe putting a hotel on the site. Funny that Terranea is there. And had the whole conversation. But, it was in its very early stages, under the napkin kind of discussion. And so we didn't have the opportunity to take it much further.
I asked Marinelanders what they thought would have happened if HBJ hadn't closed the park. Fred Schaefer.
They wouldn't have taken the whales. Would the park still be there today?
Yes.
I think Marineland had the draw. It was getting, their attendance was growing. And I think that, I don't know if they'd still be there today, because now we're facing a whole different market, with, animal. Marineland's whole basis was, back in the day, back in the late 50s, hey, we caught a whale. Cool, let's go look at the whale,
Yeah.
No one realized all these relationships how smart these animals are. So it became just like, wow, these are actually pretty cool animals. So working with the animals, people start realizing, hey, we need to take care of these animals. We need to educate these people on how valuable these animals are and what we can do to our environment to help protect our environment, to take care of the ones that are in the wild, because we can't be destroying their habitat. Although they might just seem like a dumb fish, they're not a dumb fish. They're great animals. So that's where the whole education comes into play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a place where people can come and see a real dolphin up close. So I think Marineland's case in the beginning was, wow, look at the fish. And it's like, okay, now we're growing. They're not just fish, they're smart animals. Okay, now we need to let people know how these animals are smart. Now we need to let people know how we can conserve their natural environment. So Marineland's role over the years changed, and all the theme parks in general, the oceanariums and zoos, their mission has changed over the years. It started out like a circus, but over the course of time, it gets more and more into conservation. So since the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972, people are not just going out and catching dolphins anymore. The only dolphins are there that have been bred in captivity, and there's certain rules to that. So, it's become very focused. And then you can take, did you see Blackfish by any chance?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Blackfish was I'll say the video they showed is true, but it's very one-sided because that was how it was then, but they're not offering the other side of the story in that movie. They're not saying, yeah, that's how it was, but here's where we are now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people see that and they think, oh my God, these marine mammal parks are so bad. We got to shut them all down. Right? Well, it's like, well, you're not, it's not fair because they're not like that, and that's what really bothers me the most is that was so one-sided, but now I go back and look at Marineland again, right? Would they still be there today if they had the whales? Probably not, because the times have changed. Okay. Now the focus is the wild animals, so people want to see the animals in the wild. People want to see them protected out there. Whale watching boats, and there are ways now you can get out there and see the animals up close in the wild. So that's there, but they did their part. Marineland's part was to educate the people, to take care of the ocean, to learn about the animals, and they did that. So any market, the times are going to change, So I think Marineland started out, they were pioneers. They did their mission, educated people, and now, maybe the marine mammal industry is time to kind of sunset it,
Gail Lawley, Marineland mammal trainer from 1978 to 87.
I don't know, maybe it's maybe it's too hard to be objective about it, but I would have projected, that Marineland could have gone on for a whole lot longer and become even better and bigger than it was.
It's easy to paint Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch, namely William Yovanovitch, as the villains in this story for misleading the public about its intentions and buying the park to steal Orky and Corky. But the real culprit may be the corporate mentality that took over the park after it was sold by its original owners in the early 70s. Company after company made cosmetic changes to the park, but never addressed critical infrastructure. Even if HBJ hadn't bought the park, keeping Orky and Corky inside an 80 by 80 foot tank that was never intended to house such magnificent animals was going to eventually become a problem. Either the facilities or the animals' health would have given away at some point. The city of Rancho Palos Verdes is also to blame for its failure to embrace and support the park's expansion. Fred Schaefer.
The city of Rancho Palos Verdes gave Marineland a lot of grief because, for years they always wanted to put in like a better dolphin show or dolphin stadium or a better whale stadium. And the city of Rancho Palos Verdes goes, no, it's going to cause too much traffic. We don't want that. And then eventually, sealed by its place, one of the places to run down. We're going to close it. And we can't do that. It's like, well, sorry. If you would have had better facilities, it might have been better. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but, Marineland got by with what they did.
Jim Roop, Director of Live Entertainment from 1980 to 84.
I think we tried our best to hang on to it, and the more we struggled, the tighter the noose got, it seemed.
So do you think that Hanna-Barbera did a better job at running the park than Far East Hotels?
Absolutely. They put money into it, and they knew they couldn't do a whole lot with forcing anything on the animals. So they put other things together. An actual live show with singers and dancers and a clown band. I helped develop the clown band that they had there because I was in one at Hanna-Barbera's Marineland at Kings Island in Cincinnati, or Hanna-Barbera's Kings Island in Cincinnati. So they would try to create an enhanced experience for the people who came to the park in other ways than sacrificing the comfort and care for the animals. At the same time, the animals were still the stars of the show. And I think Hanna-Barbera did a great job of trying to keep that thing going. But when SeaWorld was built and we were so far off the beaten path, we were not really free. We were 13 miles off the 405, and how many miles off the 110. So it became geographically more difficult. And I think when Hanna-Barbera sold it because they knew they weren't going to make any money. And so while I don't want to really put the blame on Far East Hotels or Harcourt Brace Yovanovitch, I think between those two, one set it up, the other one pulled the trigger.
Corporate boards and investors were a poor substitute for the love that Marineland needed to stay afloat. Marineland wasn't just a theme park. It was a marine mammal care center. It was a place that educated children on marine life. It was a place of important research. Bryant Winchell, founder of Citizens to Save Marineland, was completely right when he told the San Pedro News pilot, "Good business goes beyond meeting an arbitrary rate of return on investment.
They have purchased more than bricks and mortar. They have purchased an institution.
Marineland was more than a theme park and should have been treated like a museum, an aquarium, or a university. Sure, the park sold tickets and popcorn and was an attraction where people loved to get splashed by a 14,000-pound whale, but it was the rare place where you could get up close and experience these animals in a way that no one ever could. Elisa Mitchell, who was a costume character in the 80s.
I loved every single minute that I got to be there. It was as magical as you saw it to be when you were 10, and I wish it had stayed around a little bit longer so you could have worked there, because I'm sure you would have. And so every little bit of what you felt going in there as a child is what we felt working there. And I've seen the sentiment over and over from people that, have gone on to other things and just saying that was the best time of my life. It was just so remarkable for the group of people that you got to work with. And, and there was an age range. We were all, for the most part, younger, except for a few people in management. But there was just a blend of people that were all connected by this place. And so, the general memory is just you loved going there, and you loved working, and you loved being part of these people. And then, of course, after work, there'd be parties and get-togethers, and again, varying age ranges. There was no cliques that were happening.
Marine mammal trainer Bud Crames.
You have a small group of people that all got along, and it was fun because you socialized, and it was just that the animals made your day spectacular. So between the people, the animals, and the view, there couldn't have been a better job.
Ed Capel.
Everybody is so happy. And that, being in the park when there's just all of this positive energy from people that are there and from the staff and from the trainers, you can't get enough of that.
Oh, yeah. It's got to be hard to walk away from.
It's really hard. I've told a number of people that if Marineland had not closed, I would probably still be there to this day.
Fred Schaefer.
It was incredible. It was not even going to work. There was never a day at Marineland I felt like, oh my God, I got to go to work today. There might have been times when I went to work not the quite physical shape that I should have, because I was a little tired, because we have a pretty good social life outside of the park, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes.
So, all-nighters were not a rare occasion for a lot of the people who worked there at the time. It was a young crowd that worked there. I mean, that's another thing that was amazing about Marineland, is you have kids that were less than 30 years old running a major park, with all that responsibility and taking care of everything. It was just, you wouldn't even see that nowadays.
Yeah.
That I see of, And we all did our job, and there was everyone worked there, but some of the key people in positions were young people. It was fun.
General Services Manager Michael Jett.
The Marineland staff, for the most part, perhaps not the mammal staff, but the operations staff, the people in guest relations and food service, and the gift shops, they were fed from 3 or 4 primary high schools, close by high schools. So the staff was already friends. You couple that with the ability to be outside, the ability to, on a break, go swimming if you wanted to, if you're an employee, the ability to walk to a cliff and see seagulls flying by, and Catalina in the background looking west. If you're having a bad day and you're in a gift shop or you're in a food stand and you go on your 30 or 45-minute lunch break and you can walk out to a cliff and hear the surf breaking, and if it's late in the day, you can see a beautiful sunset or ride up on the Sky Tower and see Catalina. Where else can you do that?
Right.
And Marineland closed at a time of day that allowed employees to get together after hours. And in fact, there were employee parties at the park after hours. So that's what made it magical. You made lifelong friends. I met my wife there.
Roger Couture, who worked in janitorial from 1975 to 79.
Well, you know how people will tell you, Marineland or whatever, oh, that was the best job of my life?
Yeah.
The best thing about Marineland is pretty much all of us that worked there knew that it would be the best job of our life while we're working there. It wasn't like 10 or 20 years later we go, oh, you know, that was the best job of my life. It was like, while we were there, we knew. It's like, yeah, it's not going to get any better than this.
Tracy Belting.
A lot of people that had their first start working, as young people, either out of high school or out of college, that if their first experience was Marineland, they continued to search for that feeling throughout their careers, even if they didn't go into animal care, that kind of family feeling where everybody knew each other. And, growing up in high school and in college, most people are very loyal to their high school or to their college, and they're wearing, college T-shirts and things. We were more loyal to Marineland. Marineland was the center of our universe. Unless you were there, no one else really understands it. And I think it's that shared experience of that particular destination and the family of people and animals that were there that has stuck with people for so long.
Pearl diver in the 70s, Virginia Mason.
It was a warm and fuzzy feeling. I mean, the whole Marineland community was basically a happy place. And it wasn't like you're working at Disneyland putting people on and off rides. You really enjoyed your work, and you enjoyed being outside and being with the wildlife.
Gail Lawley.
That was the magic, if you will, of Marineland. I've worked in several other facilities since that time, and I'm privileged to have had the opportunity not only to work in Marineland, but to start there, because it really set my sense of expectations extremely high, because we were small, we were like a family, and there was opportunities there that I don't think I ever would have had anywhere else. And like I said, just even simply recognizing how important it was to respect and appreciate the individual personalities and needs and wants of each animal. And you were supported in, by management. For example, we would cancel shows if we had to. If there was something wrong that with an animal situation, whatever, we had the right to cancel a show. I don't believe SeaWorld did at that time. And so it was a really special place. And I think that's why people like yourself still do think about it, and want to talk about it and want to understand it. I think it was a real tragedy that Marineland disappeared. Did there need to be improvements made? Mostly, absolutely, the facilities, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was quite magical.
Jim Roop.
I landed in a place where I have lifelong friends, an education I don't think I would have ever gotten anywhere else, an appreciation for nature and for marine mammals that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. It was perfect for a guy from Cincinnati to be exposed to that. And I am forever grateful for those 4 years that I was there. And a guy from Cincinnati, I was in awe of it every day that I was there. And I never tired of seeing it, to see the interplay between the animals themselves, the interplay between the animals and the trainers, the personality. Each animal had a unique personality, and you kind of understand when you learn things like cetaceans, which are dolphins and whales. They have the same central nervous system that you and I have, the same bone structure in a pectoral fin that we have in our hands, wrists, and arms, and so you can see just how amazing they are. And it's just. I was just in awe every day that I was there. And even though my goal was to be in radio, it was hard to leave when I was offered the job at KRLA when I left Marineland to take. So it was really tough. And that's why I hung around. That's why we're all still great friends, all the people with whom I worked. In fact, we have a reunion coming up in June again. Mm-hmm. So it was just, I never, ever tired of it. And plus, I mean, just the geography was beautiful. Oh. You know, it was just absolutely amazing.
I hope you've enjoyed these past 12 episodes of the podcast and that it helped jog your memory of a magical place that brought millions of people joy over its 33-year history. I also hope the show was a fitting tribute to the countless animals who lived at the park. They were taken from their homes in the sea, placed in unnatural circumstances, and thrust into the roles of ambassadors for their species without ever being asked. But if they knew, I'd like to hope that they'd be proud that their sacrifice fostered a love and understanding of their species that has probably helped protect millions in the wild. It's been said that the Pacific has a long memory. The water at its greatest depths has been around since the time of Charlemagne. I'd like to hope that on a warm summer's evening, around sunset, some of those moments blown out to sea on the ocean breeze decades ago find their way back home. And if you stand on the cliffs of Terranea, close your eyes and listen closely, and you can hear the laughter of children, the mischievous bark of sea lions, and the joyous squeaks of killer whales wafting through the salty sea air. Those are the sounds of LA's own Marineland.
He's on his way, just took in a big breath of air. You are about to see the largest whale in captivity. This is Orky Up and Touched It! You've been a wonderful audience, and thank you!
LA's Own Marineland was written, produced, and hosted by Todd Perry. That's me. But this wouldn't be possible without the help of a wonderful group of Marinelanders who shared their incredible stories. For more information, references, and to support the show, visit marinelandpodcast.com and follow us on Twitter at MarinelandLAPod. Please be sure to sign up for our Patreon page, where you can learn even more about the history of Marineland by listening to full interviews with 19 people closest to the park. You'll also get the Patreon-exclusive episode, Making Marineland, that tells the backstory of how this podcast came to be. Get over 15 hours of fun for just $5.99 a month. Get started at patreon.com/MarinelandPodcast. That's patreon.com/MarinelandPodcast.